This isn't something I expected to say, but making Game Boy games from scratch is addictive. Like, I'm just craving making more Game Boy games all the time. And sorry, I'm getting a call. Oh, it is from my very real, very beautiful, very intelligent PR manager. Hello, I'm your cool Uncle Marissa. Yeah, I know you called me. I just, like, I thought it would be a good time to show off my new, like, splash title page that matches the logo one of my Nerd Fuse made me. Okay, yeah, no, I'm making Game Boy games. No, I'm making them from scratch. I'm making Game Boy games from scratch. I mean, also Game Boy Color games, mainly Game Boy Color games. Yes, like board and everything. Yeah, I'm like designing the stickers and... Oh yeah, I see how that would be confusing and people think I'm making Game Boy games like as a game developer. But I don't know, like I'm obsessed with making Game Boy games from scratch, but like not actually developing the game. It's more like making the PCB and the shell and everything it just feels a little long for a title, don't you? Hello? My very real, very sexy PR manager hung up on me. But yeah, I am really into making Game Boy games from scratch now, and it's really fun, but especially with games that haven't been translated to English ever, like Japan exclusive games. And you know, it kind of makes sense because I already love making stickers for Game Boy games, and now it's like taking that extra step. I love to solder. I know, crazy, right? But like, it's actually fun. It's like my version of puzzle making. So today I thought we could make one together, and we're gonna just like walk through it. And the things that are featured in this video that you would need is, this is largely made possible by Bucket Mouse / Mousebite Labs boards. So he's got Game Boy Color, Game Boy MBC5, MBC3 boards that you can order from like PCBWay, and you just populate them according to the ROM type. Now, don't exit out of this video yet because you're like, I don't understand anything you're saying, because it's actually quite easy to follow. I'm gonna put resources in the description, and let's kind of walk through it in this video as well. But basically, you look at the game that you want to flash, and you look at the size of the game, the size of the memory it needs, and then you sort of, and like whether it's MBC5 or 3 or whatever, and then you cross-reference that with Bucket Mouse's parts list based on what you are going to be making, and then it's pretty straightforward from there. So yeah, you would need a PCB from Bucket Mouse that you can order from PCBWay or buy from his store, and you would also need a donor part from a game that has similar attributes. Now, in terms of flashing the ROM, I have a couple of videos on Funny Playing's Burnmaster, and I said that in that video as well. The Burnmaster seems like a really great tool for someone who's like very casual about this, who, you know, it's a great entry-level tool. For example, if you want to flash a Game Boy Advance game, and especially Game Boy Advance games because there's not really a way for us to build our own quite yet, you can buy sort of the corresponding type from AliExpress and then flash the game that you want on it with the Burnmaster, provided that, you know, you're sure that it's the same. You can also use it to retrieve saves off your games. You can use it to read the ROMs off of your games and rewrite them. So it does the basic stuff really well. But for this type of journey, because it's a little bit more convoluted, you need to input some more things. And I have had the Burnmaster, like if you're just messing around with it, you can just kill the cartridge by like pressing the wrong button. So it really is just good for like straightforward ABC kind of thing. No messing around. So yeah, for this one, I went with BennVenn's Joey Jr. primarily because I thought it was cute, and I've been part of Ben's Discord for a while now, and it's just a really supportive and active community. But the GBX Cart RW is also comparable to the Joey Jr. So I don't think one is better than the other. When I've done research on it, it's sort of like, you know, the same. And it's even less of a gap now because BennVenn's Joey Jr. used to have a very drag and drop style where you kind of just drag what you need into a Windows folder, and also you had like the notepad file inside which you would edit to save things or whatever you wanted. But Lesser Kuma has created an interface for the Joey Jr. that is essentially the same interface as the GBX Cart RW, and we'll take a look at that in this video as well. So they both now have a software interface. BennVenn is also working on his own software interface, which I did try that out too, but Lesser Kuma's was just, I feel, a bit more intuitive for me. So that's the one we're going to be using. And from what I understand, the community around GBX Cart RW is also very active and very helpful. So you can't go wrong with either of those if this is the kind of thing that you want to do. Now, this project is also a great micro soldering practice project. If you have gotten to the point where you've maybe done a kit or two, you have maybe tried Bucket Mouse's like Power Regulator, which is the cheapest micro soldering project probably that you can make and also use. It's kind of a step above that because it's, very few parts. You're working with a pretty clear schematic and area, and the testing is pretty straightforward as well. It's nowhere near as time consuming or adrenaline inducing as building like a Game Boy Pocket Color or a Frog Boy Color or any of these other bigger Game Boy mods. So you would need, of course, a soldering iron. A knife tip J-tip is particularly helpful with these kinds of projects, and hot air and or a hot plate. I use those in conjunction, and you would need that flasher, you would need a donor. And so let's just go ahead and walk through this based on the game that we're gonna make in this video, which is the Star Ocean game for Game Boy Color. Now, I had no idea there was a Star Ocean game for Game Boy Color. It never came out in the English-speaking world. It was Japan exclusive, and it is a big game. This is a big, hefty file. So I'm really excited to do this and to play this game because I really like Star Ocean. It's not a deep JRPG from the games that I have played. It's very like surface level, but it's fun. It's like sometimes you just want a JRPG without having to be like, I don't understand what's happening. I don't understand why I'm crying. I don't want these characters to leave me. I love them. Like sometimes you just want to be like, haha, monster go boom. Ah, we have defeated evil guy. Yes. Oh, another thing that we're going to be looking at is HDR's Game Boy save battery retainer. HDR has this little flex PCB. You stick it on your Game Boy Color PCB, and on there you put a battery retainer, and that way you can just pop the battery in and out when it goes dry. So let's just see if it's worth it, because these batteries they last like 10 years before they go dry, at least. They should. And the pre-tabbed batteries are more expensive than the batteries that are not tabbed. So that is the main selling point of this, more so than a solder-free kind of thing, because literally you have to do it one time, find someone who can do it for you, etc. Let's see how that works too. All right, so here is Mousebite Labs, Bucket Mouse, Nick, man of many names and man of many projects, GitHub. So here we can see he's got so many different kinds of carts, and we can go to the repository tabs to see all of them, but the ones we need are actually mostly on the front page. Anyway, so he has an MBC1 cartridge, MBC3, an MBC5 multi-cart, MBC3 multi-cart, and an MBC5 cartridge. Just so you know, the multi-carts are obviously to put multiple games on a single cart. Some common uses seem to be putting the 2 Zelda Oracle of Seasons, Oracle of Ages games, to put the sister Pokemon games on them, a variety of things, but we're just going to be looking at single game cartridges. So now we want to know, what do we use? Which one do we start with? We can go to the DIY Flash Cartridge Assistant, put together by chrisdingus.com. And I've already started the search for Star Ocean, which is the game that we are looking for. And there it is, the first one, Star Ocean Blue Sphere Japan. And we see it is an MBC5 mapper. So that means we're going to go back and we want the MBC5 cartridge. So we already know that. And from there, how do we get the board? So you can go to PCBWay, where Nick has a project page, and you can find the MBC5 single cartridge, and you can place an order from here. Of course, with this, there is a minimum order of 5 pieces, but you are instead able to choose your own color, etc., etc. But if you just want 1 or 2 and you don't want to have to go through submitting to PCBWay and you like what's already there, you can just go to his Etsy, where he has it right here for just $5. And this way you can also mix and match, you know, if you want to make more than one. All right, so you have either purchased the MBC5 from Bucket Mouse's Etsy, or you've ordered it from PCBWay, and so now you need the parts. So we can go back to the Flash Cartridge Assistant, and we look at SRAM. So we need a 256 K-bit SRAM. And if we go back to the GitHub, and we go to the bill of materials, we see here that you can buy the SRAM at this link on Mouser. And all you need to do is just find the correct one. So in this case, again, we are going to look for 256 K-bit, and it's actually right here, the first one. And the bigger ones are a wee bit more expensive than the smaller ones, and there are very few games comparatively to the rest that require such a large memory size. All right, so you also need the MBC5. This is a required donor. So the way that you can do that, it really is up to you on whether you go backwards or forwards on this. So for example, I have a ton of games from Japan, and so I would just look them up here and see, you know, so I have, for example, Survival Kits, and I have the Japanese version, and it's like, okay, so this is MBC5. So I could take it from that, and I believe that is what I will be taking it from. And MBC5 is very common as well, so generally pretty good. Or you can, you know, forward think and look up really cheap Japanese games or something, or even American games, for example. Like, I don't think 102 Dalmatians Puppies to the Rescue is probably going for that much, so maybe you can find one super cheap online and buy that for the donor. But ultimately, that's really up to you. And then the other one that is suggested to be taken from a donor is the battery management IC. Like Bucket Mouse says right here, you can buy one, but if you're going to be harvesting, why not? In this case, though, you do want to find a cartridge that does have the battery management if you are using a battery, like a save battery, in the game that you're flashing. And so we can go back to the DIY Cartridge Assistant. And in this case, we're like, oh, okay, so 102 Dalmatians Puppies to the Rescue does not use a battery. So you would be able to take the MPC5 from there, but not the battery management. But for example, 4x4 World Trophy, 4x4 World Trophy down here has MPC5 and battery required for saving, so you can probably take the U4 off of that. Just to note, the SRAM, like Bucket Mouse says right here, you can take it from a donor cartridge. You can also use a bigger one for a smaller game if you don't have any plans to use it in the future, but you can't use a smaller one for a bigger one. I would like to think that that's pretty obvious. Okay, now the bill of materials on this is a little more tricky than usual because you're not just getting the same thing for every project. You have 4 different options for what you're going to be buying. So no save carts is any game without the battery. It's just not saving anything. It's pop in and play. So the little X marks what you need. Pretty obvious. And now these 2 are the different types of U4 chip you may find in your donor. So all you have to do is take a close look at that donor and see which one of these is its name. And then you can introduce yourself to them and also go with which one it is on this table and buy the rest of the stuff. Save carts without donor U4 chip, that means that you are buying the battery management from Mouser that Bucket Mouse has linked. And if you're doing that, then you follow this one. Now I'm going to tell you a secret. I am recording this from the future, so I don't entirely remember which one of these 2 I had, but they are very, very similar, except for this little section over here. And that's another thing with this board, you are not going to be filling every single spot. There will be empty places on the board, and do not be stressed by that. It's different for the different parts that you use, whether it has a save or not, etc. One thing to note, I think the hardest one to source can be the Flash EEPROM, which is one you have to buy from AliExpress or eBay. I've found luck on AliExpress. I would link it, but these things go in and out of stock so much that actually the one that I did end up purchasing is not there anymore. It doesn't exist on AliExpress anymore. So that's a little annoying, but you just need to look up the titles and you should be good to go there. Also, do note that it's not just as simple as like getting the EEPROM and it works. It needs to be the right size. So for that, we can go to the catskull.net GB-ROM database, which is also linked in the description. Look up Star Ocean, and it says here that the ROM size is 4 MB. So you would need to find an EEPROM that is 4 MB or 64 megabits. And the fun journey that you will have is usually, you will probably put this information into AliExpress, like the part number, and then from there they don't list usually the size, so the things that are available at the moment, you can reverse search them, find their data sheets, and figure out what's right for you. Or the laziest thing you can do is probably just go to Bucket Mouse's Discord and ask there, hey, does anyone know I'm looking for this size? Has anyone bought one recently? Where from? Once all the math is out of the way and you know which save management chip you have, you can order all the parts that you need and just wait for everything to arrive. So let's move over to the desk, fast forwarding to all the parts being here. Here is the board I'm using. It's a beautiful pink silk screened board sent to me by Rain, who's a wonderful member of the community and makes very cool cartridge labels. I'm gonna do my usual putting on solder paste with a pair of tweezers because this was still prior to me buying a fresh tube of solder paste. Pro tip, always clean your solder paste syringe attachments between uses. Otherwise, you will have to do this nonsense. It's not all that bad though. Apologies for the lack of microscope footage. I don't know what happened. It got corrupted or something. So this is all I have. But thankfully it's a very small project, so we should be chugging along pretty well. There's not a particular preferred method, I think, of placing components on this, but I would go with placing the small components that are out of the way before placing the bigger components, and then after that placing the components that go in between those. So it's going to vary, obviously, based on what bill of materials you end up with, but I'm going to sort of do the outside first. Now that those components that are sort of on the periphery are soldered, I'm going to go ahead and prep the IC chip legs. Now just to show you, let's grab the MBC5 chip from, I believe, Survival Kits. So all I'm going to do is cover it in flux so that it smoothly pops off while on the hot plate. But I did make a big mistake here. Can you notice it? That's right. I left the battery on. Make sure to desolder the battery before you actually work on a board. Similarly, the battery should be the last thing that is soldered on once you are sure that your new board is working. All right, with the battery out of the way, back to the hot plate. And this guy is just gonna come right off. As always, don't pull these things off. If you gently nudge them and they don't come off, that means they're not ready yet. And so give it a little bit more time and then you can pick it up. I like to put the tweezers sort of on the corners where there are no legs, and I feel that that is the easiest way to lift it because sliding off can cause things to stick to each other as well. Now the MBC5 and the EEPROM and the SRAM, they all do have a correct orientation. There will be a dot on the IC chip and a dot on the PCB. So just make sure those are aligned. I'm gonna try to like triple fist this and do the MBC5, the SRAM, and the battery save control chip at the same time. And yeah, that did not go well. With those all set, I'm gonna fill in the middle and the EEPROM. That is the final thing that needs to be soldered on. So you see, it's very simple. You have a lot of space relatively in terms of micro soldering. And so we're just gonna move on to clean up with this knife tip. When you're soldering the board, it is good practice to put some Kapton tape on the cart pins, because if you get solder on those, then you have to start over. That is not good. I didn't have it on in the beginning, but that's only because I was working on the top. But now that I'm towards the bottom, this Kapton tape is indispensable. By the way, I'm not sure if you can see, but if you can, you might notice that my MBC5 chip is actually oriented incorrectly, and that is because at one point it fell off the hot plate and it fell off, and I just sort of put it back on without really thinking, and I put it on the wrong way. So off camera, I do end up fixing it. With everything all set up, I'm just going to clean with isopropyl alcohol so that it is ready for testing. All right, here is our beautiful board. And we're gonna pop it into the BennVenn Joey Jr., which will connect to our PC using a USB-C cable. Okay, so I'm very good at computers, so I have OBS recording OBS. Sorry about that, I hope it's not too distracting. Now this is Flash GBX set up for the Joey Jr. from Lesser Kuma. We're gonna pick Gameboy because that is the cartridge we have, and analyze flash cart, and that's fantastic. So this is all correct. 4 MB ROM, 256 SRAM, and we selected MBC5 as the mapper on the drop-down, and it is a DIY cart. So right here we can select the ROM size, the SRAM, and the mapper type, but it should automatically pick up on everything except the mapper type. I think the mapper type you have to input manually. And so then we click on write ROM, we pick the ROM that we want, that we have patched. And I will leave a link in the description to the IPS patcher tool, which you upload your ROM, you upload the patch, in this case a translation patch, and it spits out a new ROM for you with that patch applied. So let's just fast forward through this. Once this is finished writing, this is when you would plug it into your Game Boy Color, whatever, and test it and see if the cart actually works, if the game boots, and if it does, then you are good to install the battery. And one thing that you can do also is if you find a save file online or you have an old save file, you can write the save to the cart, and that way you don't have to actually create a new save in the game, you know, because that can take a while sometimes to test to see if the save actually works. And this isn't entirely foolproof. There have been times where I've written a save to a game like this and then it doesn't show up, but it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the game's saving because I'm able to save in the game. I don't know the details of it, but just a heads up. Speaking of save data, so this is HDR's battery retainer. It's super simple to install. You just line up the two holes with the two battery tab points and solder it on. Once that is soldered on the flex board, you can tin the two rectangular pads, and that's where we will solder on the actual physical retainer. Now I have put a link in the description to the retro game repair shop listing where they sell them already all set up, which I feel like if this is a anti-battery soldering thing, it's like, okay, even less soldering for you to do. I think a hoof tip would have been much better for this, but I was too lazy to change tips. All right, and then all we do is we clean up and we stick the battery in. And now we are ready to test. Also, this would be the point, by the way, that you would write the save data. All right, so this is the moment of truth now to see if we can save. I already know it works because I tested it, but let's see about the save. And amazing, we have a continue, so that means that the save was successfully written. You might also be wondering, why does your Game Boy Color look so weird? Well, if you haven't heard, this is the Frog Boy Color by Froggo Customs, and I was able to make mine on my channel with the generous support of PCBWay, who gave me all of the parts for free. And if you haven't heard about PCBWay, let's take a look at them. As is in their name, PCBWay is a PCB fabricator. They can make all sorts of PCBs for you, flex PCBs, regular PCBs, and a ton of options, including different solder masks. For example, even the boards I have that my friend sent me, I believe those are from PCBWay with the pink solder mask. You can also do 3D printing in a very vast array of materials, and their prints are always super clean in my experience. I've gotten clear resin from them and it looks amazing. CNC machining is what the Frog Boy Color that I'm holding is using. So that is just basically metal machining, and you can do a ton of different things with that, such as anodized, powder coated, and mine is actually powder coated. This was the first time I powder coated anything, and it looks awesome. They have a huge Pantone library that you can choose colors from, so the sky is the limit on this, which is really awesome because the other option of anodizing has such a limited amount of options. They have project pages, so you can immediately just add anything you need to your cart and just change the parameters to your liking, and you are all set to go, and the creator gets a proceed of your order. So way to support artists. All right, here we have it, and I have put it in the BennVenn Joey Jr. because it's cute. Isn't it cute? Look at the colors. So cute. I'm so glad that it works. It was a really rewarding process, and it's great. Get those games, you know, and maybe you even have some games already that like you've gotten maybe from Japan or something, and you're like, I don't understand what this says. You can always dump the ROM with something like this and get a translation patch and put them on a game cartridge that you've made yourself. I made this, it's so satisfying. Just a couple of things that I wanted to talk about based on these like creations. I really don't have much else to say about the Bucket Mouse board itself. It's fantastic. It does what it says on the tin. It's easy to put together. Bucket Mouse's Discord is always super helpful. But in terms of the other things, so the BennVenn Joey Jr. is fantastic. I really do prefer the sort of software integration with the GBX Cart RW. It's a lot easier to navigate. Again, super helpful community. There was like one game that I wanted to flash a while ago, and a lot of people in my Discord, we got really just like, I don't know, we got really intent on all of us having a copy of it, and I was having trouble, and someone sent me a patched version, which was really awesome of them. And in regards to that, Game Boy Advance games, it does those perfectly as well. Actually, speaking of that, I used my Joey Jr. to make myself a copy of Good Boy Galaxy. So I don't know if you guys have heard, but Good Boy Galaxy is a Game Boy Advance game that came out not too long ago. It came out on Kickstarter, and very unfortunately, it was published with First Press Games. Now, First Press Games, if you don't know, you should look them up. There's this spicy drama, but basically they're just not making things. They just like kind of are taking people's money and running. And the folks behind Good Boy Galaxy have had to take legal action. So they've kind of been talking to them via lawyer, and hopefully one way or another we will get this Game Boy Advance game officially. But in the meantime, they have sent all the Game Boy Advance backers a ROM of the game for free, which is very kind of them. And so I thought it would be neat to kind of make my own in the meantime, you know, a little showing the bird to FPG. I like wish I could take my money back from them and give it to the people who actually worked on Good Boy Galaxy. But anyway, fingers crossed. They are working on the Steam release, I believe, and they say that they hope it'll be out by the end of the year, and they are in charge of that themselves. So fingers crossed it'll be seamless and everyone can play this like adorable platformer. So yes, all that to say, BennVenn's Joey Jr. works fantastic on Game Boy Advance games as well, such as Good Boy Galaxy. And the final item is the HDR battery retainer. Now that one, I don't know if there was just some like dud going on with me or what, but it prevents the game from closing. I haven't tried it on an OEM cart, so I don't know if it works better on those. Maybe they're like slightly thinner boards. I did try it with an OEM shell, however, and I still had the issue. So I would say I don't necessarily think it's worth saving a few cents on bare batteries to use these retainers. I would just go ahead and continue buying tabbed batteries unless you just really, really need it to be super replaceable, which I personally don't see that kind of scenario, but you might. People lead different lives when it comes to Game Boy batteries, you know, very important. All that to say, these are all very cool things, and I think that it's just amazing how many things there just constantly are in the Game Boy modding community. Like, I genuinely sometimes I'm like, is it gonna end soon? Like, is there just not gonna be anything to make anymore? But there's always something. And yeah, so one of my newest hobbies is making Game Boy games, but not actually making the game. So I hope maybe you can give it a try and make your Game Boy game. I've got some stickers up in my Ko-fi as well if you'd like those. Hopefully making this video is gonna encourage me to put up all the other stickers that I haven't put up yet, so you could maybe use those for your new games. Big thank you to the modding community. Thank you to PCBWay for always being so supportive of this channel. And thank you to my Ko-fi subscribers. You keep this channel going. Thank you for watching. And don't forget, you're always welcome at Cool Uncle's house. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.